quite excited to see the launch of Wademos in the West African region. Our survey data shows that support for democracy in the region remains very strong. We also know from the survey data, though, that citizens in the region feel that the supply of democracy is lagging behind. Having an organization like Wademos championing the cause of democracy is very important in ensuring that the demands of the people, the preferences of the people in support for democracy are upheld, and that the political leadership and decision makers do not renege on the desires of the people in West Africa to have democracy as their most preferred form of government. We're quite excited to see the launch of Wademos in the West African region. Our survey data shows that support for democracy in the region remains very strong. We also know from the survey data, though, that citizens in the region feel that the supply of democracy is lagging behind. Having an organization like Wademos championing the cause of democracy is very important in ensuring that the demands of the people, the preferences of the people in support for democracy are upheld, and that the political leadership and decision makers do not renege on the desires of the people in West Africa to have democracy as their most preferred form of government.
Gori, la paix des territoires. C'est ça? C'est ça? Merci, c'est très gentil. Et puis on va appeler monsieur... Oui, c'est ça. And then we're going to call on Mr. Maurice Tanton. He's a web journalist and a blogger for Africtivist in the Republic of Benin. And then I am going to take myself up to the stage. If you bear with me. And we need another microphone, please. Okay. I need a French copy of this. I need a French copy. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Alors. I should go there. Huh? Let me go over there. So this is... Moi, je porte 1000 casques. Hein? Je porte 1000 casques. Permettez-moi. Alors, nous sommes dans notre 3e table ronde pour aujourd'hui. Les réponses citoyennes au recul démocratique.
It has for title Civic Society and the Citizens' Responses to Democratic Backsliding in the West Region.
Minus Mr. Salute Tao from and then our panelists, okay, I'm going to give you 6 minutes. Please. Yes, I know. We have the democratic rights in here. The people for the people, by the people. So 6 minutes, and then I'll give 5 minutes each to our panelists, Mr. Mboub and Mr. Tantan, who are going to share their thoughts as well. But just some really, really quick thoughts on what I've learned so far to be the missing gaps when it comes to citizens. And I learned this from Dr. Wole Ojewole, who is a great guy. He shared in a waxy meeting about placards without knowledge. Some of us carry placards on the street, and we really do not know every issue as deeply as we should, so that we can advocate as we should be doing and take the action that needs to be taken. What is that about? We also have an issue of the disconnect between digital activism and the public square. Someone earlier mentioned the place of social media and the digital space in terms of advocacy. And the last thing he mentioned is protest without interest in political power. How many of us are advocating, doing activism, and then when it comes to actually taking part in governance, we shy away? I'm going to give the floor to the main speaker, Omolara Balogun, to just set the stage and give us deep insights into this topic. You have 6 minutes. Ma.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Miss Moderator. I think there is no better definition for injustice than what has just been mentioned to me, because when I received this invitation, it was categorically stated that you have 20 minutes. So 20 minutes, 10 to 6 minutes is absolute injustice. And we need a panel on that. It's very important. But before we set up the panel, I really want to appreciate the CDD Ghana, the executive director, Professor Prempe, and team that has worked with him, Dr. Kojo and Paul and every other person. On behalf of my executive director, Mrs. Nana Afajino, who is unable to join us here today, so I'm here to represent her to begin with. It's really emotional for me when I walked in yesterday, and I remember I was speaking with my colleague John, and I said, this is what they call walking the talk. I remember when this idea was birthed, at least was introduced to us a couple of months ago by CDD. We had series of virtual conversations on what should be, what it shouldn't be, how we should go about it. I mean, it's been pretty much a co-creation process, at least from where I sit, where we sit as WACSI, and some, few other colleagues that have been part of the deliberations in and out here and there. Prof, congratulations to you and the team. This is a success. And I can tell you, something that starts beautifully like this can never get ugly. And because we have, before now, informed you of our commitment, and I'm restating it here on behalf of WACSI and my executive director, that we have a long work to do together. So just to reiterate our commitment to this, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this. Now, I don't know where to start because I'm completely distracted by my time being stolen. But since we started this conversation yesterday, it has been made clear to every one of us that the threat to our democracy is quite evident. And it's important for us to do something about it. I mean, we've been doing a lot, but we need to do a lot more. As civil society, I make bold to state here that what we have in our region today in terms of the remnant of democracy that we have, to put it that way, is actually anchored on civil society's resilience, not giving up. So when you ask me to talk about the contributions of civil society to democracy, response of civil society to democratic backsliding in West Africa, even if I was given 1 minute, the best answer is this is what we've always done. I look across this room when I walked in yesterday, and I was asking myself, even when I thought I had 20 minutes to speak, how am I going to talk about the work of WACSI in 20 minutes? How will I talk about the work of CDD, GACC, CDD West Africa, CGG in Sierra Leone, and IDEG? How can I talk about this? Because this is what we have always been doing. But just to put it in a bit of context, I think the general weakening of democracy across our region has been a great cause for concern, and the challenges to the quality of democratic institutions and governance that we have, citizens' participation and contributions, inclusive governance, accountability and transparency, is quite clear that it's fast waning across the region. When the previous speaker, I think yesterday, was talking about the outcome of the Benin Conference of 1990 and the promises and the hopes that it gave to us, we thought it's something that was going to be for a very long time. I mean, that was when we began to witness multi-party democracy, elections, separation of power across different countries, human rights and anti-corruption commissions being set up. So we knew we were serious about it, and we were working on it. And I remember one of the main reason for the birth of my organization, the West Africa Civil Society Institute, in 2005, by the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, was actually to support these democratic actors and their institutions. The Osiwa, who set up WACSI many years ago, realized that they had been given funding to different organizations, but the outcomes and results was quite, minute, just to put it that way. And then they thought between and among themselves that there's something we need to respond to. And in a meeting like this, it was agreed that, we need to respond to the issue of capacities, because most of the organizations that we had were transitioning from military regimes across board, military or wars, civil wars, and all of that. And the need to establish an organization like WACSI was birthed to support different organizations with technical support, capacity building, and all of that. And that's what we have been doing. Now, when we look at the current situation we found ourselves in West Africa, I noted a few points here on areas where civil society have been responding to democratic, threats to our democracy across the region. And most of these organizations were birthed even into that. So, for example, civil society has, over the years, up until now, continued to serve as counterweight to government excesses. And I mean, when we look at the work of CDD, for example, we don't even have to look anywhere else. It's the same all over. They have become a formidable force in checking government excesses and essentially providing alternatives for citizens. And in addition to that, civil society have also, continued to present different spaces to discuss political discourses, to have deliberations and conversations that puts political actors on their toes, especially in checkmating their activities, and of course ensuring they deliver the dividends of democracy as it's been promised. So in terms of playing that watchdog role, we have different organizations who have done that over the years, the WACC, the CDD, the IDEG and the likes. We continue to provide different platforms for this kind of issues to be discussed. In terms of facilitating preventive diplomacy efforts, we also find civil society playing that role to ensuring that issues that would naturally escalate conflict are being abated. And when we look around, you see organizations like OneApp, who has done a lot of work in terms of providing in monitoring conflict situations and early warning signs, and providing it to ECOWAS and national government to respond before situation escalates. And if I look at organizations like Campaign for Good Governance in Sierra Leone, CDD Ghana, West Africa, the role they play in ensuring that our elections remain free, fair, inclusive, and credible, it cannot be overstated. I know, for example, that in terms of electoral reform and providing support to Electoral Commission and other EMBs, organizations like these have done tremendous work, and of course in also championing advocacy for necessary electoral reforms. All of these are to support the democratic institutions that we have and strengthen our democracy. Also, I remember in 2012 as well, WACC set up what we call West African Women's Election Observation Team, which was the first group of women's-only elections observers that observes elections from a gender lens across the region, and they were co-opted into ECOWAS election observation mission. In strengthening media, I mean, we have Media Foundation here. Media is a critical part of any functional, effective, and thriving democracy. There must be media freedom, press freedom, freedom of expression, and this is what the Media Foundation has been championing.
Lara,
so in terms of really keeping that...
No, I'm not cutting you. Have your piece. I'm not cutting you. Just slow down. No, you don't have 20 minutes. Just slow down for the interpreters. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So I was talking about the role of civil society in ensuring that the space in which we work remains open and free, and then there's media and press freedom, and this is what Media Foundation has been championing for a very long time. And what about the efforts of organizations like GACC, leading and championing anti-corruption crusades, across Ghana. In Ghana, we have Enough is Enough in Nigeria. And we have, I think CGG also does a lot of work around anti-corruption campaigns in Sierra Leone and across the different countries in West Africa. We know the role that corruption plays in our governance system, where public resources that it's meant to support social services are being looted by our leaders, and being sent to Western countries, to Panama and all of that. Definitely citizens will suffer the consequences, and because of this and the need for us to stop this act of corruption, we have this organization championing, some of these campaigns and advocacies. In addition to that, we have the West Africa Democracy Radio, which is a sister organization to WAXI, I must say at this point. This organization seeks to protect and defend the ideas of democratic and open society by disseminating development information through their networks of community radios. The role they played in ensuring in Gambia cannot be overstated. It was quite instrumental in the return of democracy to the Gambian people and, of course, to the region generally. What about the role we have been playing in expanding and protecting civic space? A thriving democracy, exists in a civic, open, and inclusive society. There are so many civil society organizations who have been working continuously to ensure that the space in which they work and in which citizens move is free and is safe, in the sense that citizens have the freedom to speak, they have the freedom to express their views, they have the freedom to engage in governance processes that concerns their own lives. And in that area, WAXI and Spaces for Change in Nigeria have just recently launched a project, the Civic Space Resource Hub, which mainly seeks to provide capacity support to civil society organizations working to expand civic space in Nigeria. This is in addition to the work that Civicus has been doing for so many years, monitoring incidences of attacks against citizens, governments, retrogressive policies that have been chunked out, its impact, and of course amplifying advocacy in that regard. We also have organizations who are using technology to advance democracy to ensure that it does not crash. And without looking far, if I look at the work that Pence Plus Byte is doing here in Ghana, it's amazing, using what they call Pence Plus Byte African Election Project to empower journalists on how to cover elections processes effectively and efficiently. I think this is important. I've talked about the anti-corruption campaigns. I think a few other points I need to mention before I drop the mic would be the role of social movement, what we call new actors. I think with the resurgence of military coups across the region, we continue to see, citizens uprising against this kind of illegal government takeover. In Nigeria, for example, we had the Occupy Nigeria, and the work that Fix the Country team is doing here in Ghana, Occupy Ghana, Gambia has decided, Yen Marie, Belo Citoyen, Togo debut. These are social movements that rose up to challenge one form of threat to democracy across their countries, all over the region. And all this road cannot be undermined. I think earlier on in the previous panel, somebody raised the point around the need for civil society to collaborate with government. Of course, we do collaborate with government. And I can tell you that most of the successes that most governments, not only in West Africa, have achieved, especially in the area of gender, has been in collaboration with women-led organizations. And we do that a lot. For example, I believe Dr. Kojo can bear me witness. In the process of developing the new NPO law here, we have been on government, supporting them, providing them with right information, what would work, what will not work, and truly, they have given us audience. And it's the same in other parts of countries. I know the work that Campaign for Good Governance is doing with the electoral body in Sierra Leone. I know the work that CDD West Africa is doing in Nigeria around election situation room and responding to various political issues across the region. So these are some of the contributions that we have made. What is the last point I want to make is actually enhancing citizens' capacity and civil society organization capacity, which is, a really the primary niche of my organization. How do we ensure that the citizens that we are engaging are empowered with the right knowledge, the right data, and they have the capacity to make demands, for accountability, for good governance and dividends of democracy, from their respective government. These are some of the contributions that civil society have made. But what are the threats to this contribution? Do we see these contributions continuing for the time to come? Some of the problems that we mentioned in the previous panel continue to threaten the sustainability of civil society. So I want to round up with this, that if we do not create an enabling environment for civil society to operate, an enabling environment for civil society to thrive, if civil society do not have access to right tools, resources, capacities, especially resources, you agree with me that right now, donor funding, local funding, everything seems to be drying up. But these organizations are still relying on their resiliency to work. If they do not have access to dynamic, influential, independent, and able to do their work without no form of restraint whatsoever, either from government or from external or internal factor. So I think these are some of the issues that we should be talking about. But as for contributions of civil society to democracy, we've always done that. And we have always, rise up to defend democracy where threats are coming from various angles over the years. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Omolara. A round of applause for Waxi's work. For 15 years and counting, Waxi has been in this space. And this is what some of us in the civil society have been defending: multi-sectoral coalitions for advocacy that are supported by organizations that see the value of the work that we are doing. Thank you, Omolara. I'm going to quickly move on. Et je vais passer le micro à nos collègues du Sénégal et du Bénin. Mais avant cela, les démocraties en recul, les coups d'État.
Democracy, coup d'État, and the rise of authoritarian regimes, extension of presidential terms, human rights violations, and power abuse. And then how do we use our voices? Now, I'll give the floor to our colleague from Senegal by the name Umar in order to find out from him what are his perspectives from the organization Jamii Gori. Now, what is the situation in Senegal? What was successful in terms of responses from the citizens? What needs to be improved, and what are the challenges to overcome? Thank you very much. Just like she said, my name is Omar, and I represent our organization by the name Jamii Gori. I'd like to talk about the perspectives together with the actions of my organization on the field. Before I do that, I want to congratulate, to thank, and pay tribute to Wademos, because this is a network that gives us the opportunity to discuss on democracy. If we don't do so, if we don't discuss, if we don't talk about democracy, democracy will die. The future of democracy in Africa depends on our deliberations. Democracy is alive, but the vitality and progress of democracy depends on how we discuss every day. That's why I want to encourage Wademos to ensure we are able to discuss more and more on democracy. As I keep saying, democracy is not the property of any people or civilization, even though there is a colonial conception that seeks to say that African societies are foreign entities to democracy, which is not true, because there is no naturally democratic society, and there is no naturally incompatible society to democracy. We only have people that create conditions and the possibility to build democracy that we have to build. So once again, I want to say a big thank you to Wademos for this great opportunity given to Jamii Gori that I represent, just to tell you a bit about what we do in Senegal. Jamii Gori is the name of our organization. This is a name that was formulated with the national language. Sometimes we talk about democracy to people in, in language that they do not even understand, language that they do not even grasp. We explain about democracy in French and in other languages. Meanwhile, people in the inner part of the countries don't even understand these languages. So through our languages, our local languages, we need to discuss on the implications of democracy, the values and the principles. That's why we decided to term the name of our organization starting with JAM, which means in Wolof peace. So every morning you wake up, you meet somebody, and then they ask you, do you have peace? Do you have jam? And over here, the peace I'm referring to has nothing to do with the lack of absence of conflict. It's just peace of mind or tranquility. So this is a lack of suffering, with the well-being of the person in his own environment. So this is what we mean by Jamegori. We are talking about localities, venues, and areas. We didn't start from Dakar because with Imasla, we started from the decentralization approach. This is because we realized that everything starts from the capital. Even to launch Wadimos, we did it in Accra. I believe that we could start within localities and communities. So we chose a different alternative towards democracy. In Senegal, we just decided to trust the youth. We've been saying it since yesterday. We believe that by 2050, will be 4% of the population will be youth, the youth. So we need to organize to mobilize ourselves. And we went to Kaolack, which is a local community in Senegal. It's 192 kilometers away from Dakar, and it's one of the 14 administrative areas of Senegal in the center east of the country. It's close to the Gambia. The area has 290,000 people, and we are expecting a growth. So we didn't start from Dakar, we started from Kaolack and to another locality. Just like I said, every political decision taken is usually done in the capital cities, and populations are forgotten. People are left behind, and they are not even involved by the political life of their country. Everything is monopolized in the capital cities. So we decided to come up with a new narrative starting in Kaolack. This narrative is focused on three movements. So this is the Kaolack map you can see on the screen. Yes, next slide. So we focused our work, and what I'm just doing is a quick presentation. I'm trying to show you what we've done, what we've organized together with the youth pertaining to municipal elections, because we are making progress in a political context, and that's what led us to the creation of JAME. The youth are generally not involved in decision making, and sometimes when they are within communities to work together with associations in order to develop their country and community, when it comes to decision making, for instance, who will lead a community, a particular community, the decision is taken in Dakar, and it's the president who decides. This is what we call the vertical politics. That's why we decided to go with an horizontal approach. And with this approach, every decision is taken within the communities, and the people are going to be the one to adopt the people who will lead us, who lead them. So we just wanted to agree with the values and the principles of democracy, and we are working with time to the political time. And by that, I'm referring to elections. Political parties have failed, and if you take the Senegal map, you realize that political parties only talk about elections. They are only interested in manipulation, disinformation, in lies, and they are only ineffective. What they do is mostly insult each other. So in a whole year, they only talk about elections and elections. That's why we believe that it's important to to do away with the election time. And I will tell you what exactly we did during the last elections held in Senegal. I just said it, that we decided together with civil society members, and these were people from Yanama and young associations, to be involved in the municipal elections. The Senegalese uh, government gave an amount of 15,000 francs CFA to neutralize people to be involved in the leadership of their communities. So we mobilized in Kaolak, and when the young people from other areas heard our message, they got on board, and we contribute to pay the amount fixated by the country. We were able to involve 43 associations for them to be involved in the political life of their country. This is what we do on the field. We discuss with the youth with regards to institutions, and we make them understand that the political life of their country is in their hands. The vitality of democracy in their locality depends on their involvement. So this is a discussion we are having with the youth on the field. You can see on this slide, it says that the youngest candidate was from our organization. This is a sample of a newspaper by the name Tribune. And this candidate was only 27 years. His name is Lamine Fofana, 20 years old, 27 years old. And you can see that we are making headway. We started working with the youth. We started involving them more and more in order to help them take decisions and build the democracy. Next slide. This slide serves as an example during electoral campaigns. In order to understand democracy, it's important to organize popular forums. During campaigns, our politicians organize caravans of about 20 cars, and they spend 4 million francs CFA. Can you imagine? So we didn't agree with this waste of resources. We just decided to go with forums. Every evening we went to a different area to discuss with them. This is Fadel Barou in Senegal. He was discussing with women in an area of Kaolak with regards to change and electoral campaigns. This picture portrays proximity visits we did on the field. And now let's talk about political construction. The time of construction is to help people to support each other, to make them understand that they are their own cause of any misfortune they live. It's incumbent on them to drive the change they want. So we organize ourselves with people on the field. What you need to remember that one important principle of democracy is to fight poverty. Our main goal is to fight social injustice and ensure that our people are able to live in a very conducive environment. Otherwise, everything we will do for democracy, the people won't be involved. You can't talk about democracy without having a decent lifestyle. So this is a slide where we supported people. We undertook activities. We go to their areas telling them that your area is not as clean as it should be. So we get on board, we clean together, and we ensure that the environment is much safer and neater. This is one of the examples. This slide also shows another, and it's called a health hub, a health hut. You can see people lying on the floor, and we tried as much as possible to rebuild this health place. And this is what we did with the place. This is how we built it all over with our own resources. So the philosophy of our organization is based on action. We are not only in the theory, we want to be practical as much as possible. And we don't want to wait on resources coming from somewhere else. We believe that the development we want for Africa is our own job and responsibility. We are not leaving the job to anybody outside Africa. We will not let anybody take our job, and we will take charge of our own areas, our own communities, our cities, and even structures. So just getting back to Kaolak, and Kaolak has issues in the ground, and this phenomenon leads to affect the quality of lifestyle. We have what we call salon du salon, and there is a colonial company together with a political elite that is affecting the environment. This contributes to the poor state of the soils, and it's affecting the environment, making life unbearable for people. So our economy is affected by businessmen and elite that is making our situation difficult. Kaolack is at the center of Senegal, and from Kaolack you can go to Mali. From Kaolack you can enter into the Gambia and even Guinea. So we believe that the youth is important. The youth has to start building from our community and to go outside. We've seen how people are living their communities in search of greener pastures. But as a solution, we've decided to promote a new political class so that we are able to make progress. That's the reason why I'm here today in Ghana to tell you about Jame Kori. And that's why Fadel Bao, a former coordinator of Yanama, is in Kuala to involve the youth in order to build the development and democracy we want for our community. Yeah, he was just on time, and we want to thank him for the energy. Thank you, Umar. We've seen how you've used alternative measures to drive change. This is a movement, a strong movement that is implemented by Jamego. We see how things are very interesting, and it shows how necessary it is to add voices in citizen response if we want to have effective and lasting solutions. We want to involve every voice. I believe this strategy can equally be repeated or duplicated in other parts of the region with a lot of dynamism. So I think with your permission, we are going to share your presentation with everyone, because I believe Wademos could even share some of your communications. And who knows, this can serve as a manual of response. Yes, I agree, but I think we want to have a manual with responses to our issues. You think it's possible with Wademos? Yes. Thank you very much, Omar. Now, I will turn to my colleague Maurice, and he will share with us perspectives from Benin.
Bonsoir à tous, merci Kathleen.
Good afternoon all. Thank you, Kathleen. Sharing perspective from Benin alone. I'm not sure, I'll probably go a bit beyond since I'm here as a representative from activists, which is the League of Bloggers and African Activists for Democracy. There is a lot to share, there is a lot of personal experience, but from the point of view of activists with regards to responses civil society organizations can share. Now, for about 2 days, we started this discussion, and I've seen how we've established the situation clearly about the region. It's clear that there is a backslide of democracy. This is um, unfortunate. But what we haven't really said is that today we are facing leaders that are acknowledging this reversal of democracy. We see leaders that don't shy away from saying that indeed there is a reversal of democracy in their countries and they are not really affected. Some years ago, when some people or regimes are known to be authoritarian, they try as much as possible to provide answers to defend democracy. Today, there is a change of paradigm, and we don't have to lose sight of it. As a reason, a lot of people, a lot of leaders are okay with this bad situation. There are internal and external factors that make the situation so. We see these cases in the United States, a country painted to be a democratic one. We saw the attack at the Capitol, and this gives ideas, strong ideas to our countries that are still building their democracy. There are equally influences from other superpowers.
Ces éléments. De l'autre côté, autre élément de contexte que je veux soulever, c'est qu'on a aujourd'hui des régimes militaires qui se mettent en place après avoir renversé des autorités constitutionnellement élues et qui proclament vouloir défendre ou restaurer la démocratie. Ce qui, de toute évidence, est paradoxal parce qu'on est tous d'accord qu'un coup d'État est antinomique avec le principe démocratique. Donc, voilà
the principle of democracy.
deux éléments que je voulais soulever
So
avant
these
d'aller
2 points I just wanted to put on the table before I go deep in my communication. And I want to assure you, Kathleen, that I will be as much as possible concise and straight to the point. And my communication will focus on 3 major axes. In Africtivist, we have things that can serve as urgent answers with regards to the decline of democracy. The first one is a global innovation, and it's our responsibility as civil society organizations. Since the years 90s, in the 90s, African countries started democratization processes which made it possible for CSOs to play significant roles. 30 years later, it's important to interrogate ourselves with regards to our actions. Our way of acting since 30 years, is it still effective today? Don't we have to change our ways of acting? Because political regimes have taken time to get used to how we operate. I'm from Benin, and today is extremely difficult for CSOs to have a clear voice because politicians have been able to close all spaces and opportunities. So we need to innovate. I'll use this opportunity to congratulate Wademos for really understanding this point clearly and made available in its initiatives what can be called democratives. And this is an initiative that will mobilize actors that are generally left behind in the promotion of democracy. I'm talking about artists, poets, slummers, writers, people that we generally don't work with to build democracy. These are people that can be pillars. In Benin, we did a little experiment in 2018. This was in a context with social injustice. Today we have laws that prohibit people from gathering. Somebody said it, that in order to have a peaceful protest, you don't need permission, you just need to notify the authorities. But this is not possible in Benin. People don't have the opportunity to gather. So in 2018, activists stepped up to the plate to condemn this. So they rather turn to social media. They create an hashtag, everybody goes out on the street. For instance, you go out, you take a picture of yourself and you post on your social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and the likes. And this generates a lot of feedback. So there are different types of alternative movements we can explore. By global innovation, we can also add components of technology. We agree that in Africa, digital revolution is disrupting various sectors. Today, we refer or we mention fintech generating billions of dollars. I think this revolution is equally possible in the political domain with what we call the civic stake. I'll come back to this third point because this is a language that the youth is able to understand clearly, and the youth forms the heart of safeguarding democracy in our sub-region. So it's clear that we need to rely on technological innovations to provide a clear and relevant answer or response to the challenges to democracy. So civil society actors need to move to the next level. They need to be a 2.0 version of their actions. Secondly, we need to be united. We need a certain form of solidarity to guarantee freedom of press and expression. There is a democratic decline in the sub-region, and you do well to understand that it's associated to the freedom of association, freedom of press and expression. Over the last 5 years, a lot of countries lost their position in the ranking of in the global ranking. I want to talk about the case of Benin that I really know, but I believe the situation is virtually the same in countries like Senegal or even Cote d'Ivoire, which were models at a certain point. I'm not talking about Mali that is now under a military regime. So authorities don't appreciate the freedom of press. And it's our role to fight so that journalists and informal actors in the field of blogging, whistleblowers, and influencers can be protected. They will be able to work freely. They will be able to host public debates and dialogue on all channels, whether they are traditional media like TV and radio, including the new ones. We should have support in place for these kind of activities. I'm happy to see that in the thematic areas of Wadimos, there is one part that focuses on freedom of press and media. We all need mechanisms like emergency funds to ensure that whistleblowers and bloggers are safe and secured all the way from the outside. Sometimes we can find ourselves in a country and there are things we cannot say. So the solidarity we are trying to build should be able to help somebody like me from Benin who wants to raise an issue that can endanger my life should be secured. And I should be able to go through somebody outside Benin to convey my message. And this concern has to be taken by other civil society actors in the sub-region, and the authorities in Benin won't have any other choice than to provide a clear response to the problem. I'll give you an example to buttress my point. In 2019, we were organizing elections in Benin. People are going to tell you that they were fair and exclusive, and there was no other party from the opposition. It's rather a lot of social movement in the country on the ballot on or election day. The authorities just cut access to internet because if no one talks about what is happening on the ground, everything is possible. At that time, there was no media personnel, no journalists to report what was happening in the inner parts of the country. But there are mechanisms we should be able to uh, develop so that even if there is no access to internet, we are still able to work. We are still able to disseminate the information or improve the voice of the youth. This is what we mean or understand by defense of democracy, because the defenders or activists have a lot of experience to share with a network like Wademos. We still have a lot of challenges. Countries can even witness them. And today um, we have load shedding being a common phenomenon in various parts of our continent. I want to end my intervention with my third point, which is really important. Various speakers have raised it already, but I'll add my voice. We are a young population. 70% of the population is young. And for me, this youthful population is a threat and an opportunity for democracy. You know, I'm saying this because the lack of democracy means a lack of hope for the youth, lack of fulfillment. And this, in connection with the new implications pertaining to the increase in terrorism moving all the way from the Sahel to the Gulf of Guinea, it's clear that we have a choice to make. Either we provide clear and accurate answers to democracy and good governance for the benefit of the youth that will be fulfilled, so that we do not push them towards violent extremism. And for that matter, civil society organizations have a clear role to play. And we have to educate the youth. In Benin, we see how some young people don't take any interest in the political life of their country because they believe politicians are all corrupt. And they don't understand that it's out of their actions that things can change. We need to sensitize them and explain, make them understand that they need to be actors. They shouldn't lose hope by saying nothing will change. If they have the opportunity, they should act. So it's a training we have to give to them to ensure that the change comes from them. They need to understand it's important to take the right decisions and choices, because through their actions, they can change the future or the course of actions. In Africtivism, we started a movement or an initiative online pertaining to election, democracy, and good governance. And today we have a good number of young people across the continent, and we believe they will be able to uh, improve the life of their peers. This is something we can duplicate within Wademos. Educating the youth is very key for what we are doing. And this leads me to the implication of digital revolutions. Today, young people understand the language on social media. They understand the use of mobile applications and web tools. So we have no other choice than to improve our ways in order to meet their expectations and not leave them to ill-intended people.
Thank you very much, Maurice. what have my main takeaways from your intervention with regards to strategies of advocacy strategies are still relevant 30 years later. And I think this question is really relevant. And Africa TV's work and its expansion, the expansion of its work is really notable in the sub-region. It means that advocacy is also becoming dynamic.
Et c'est avec ça que je vais ouvrir notre discussion plénière. So we're going to take questions. Some of the keywords that have come out here: youth, grassroots, women, inclusivity, innovation, and digital technology, building, resources, and knowledge. I want to open up the floor so that we can share our perspectives and questions. Let's make it brief. Okay, can we just share the mic? Our experts are going to take the questions down. We will take all your perspectives and then they will respond so that we can gain time. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Il faudrait vraiment
very much. I would like to thank our panelists for the wealth that they've shared with us. And I have two questions. The first is directed to my friend Umar. I would like to know your relations with the other political parties and civil society organizations. You know, at times we are tempted to have populist speeches, especially when we refuse to collaborate with other colleagues. And then we think that our actions or ideas are innovative. And then we try to do everything by our own and to discard ourselves from all the people who don't think alike. So I would like to know what are your relations with the other political parties and civil society organizations. The second question is for my colleague from Benin. I know very well this country. I think that in Benin, the media is in a kind of bipolarization state. And at times you have some themes around food. And, you know, people believe that most of the journalists are still hungry in Benin. And so they do not really have a kind of one side, one argument. So what are you doing in terms of sensitizing your colleague journalists for them to be credible? So what are some of the actions that you are envisaging to sensitize your colleagues? Thank you very much. I would like also to thank our panelists for their interventions. I would like to really stress on the quality of my brother, the quality of my brother's communication. With regards to civic liberties restrictions in Benin, I would like to add that when it comes to economic governance and especially financial governance, reforms have been undertaken. And Benin has been in this dynamic for some time. But as we say in Social Watch Benin, when we have those reforms, the intent is to better the current system and to forge the way ahead and not to go back. But we have noticed at our end that when it comes to civic monitoring, when it comes to public procurement, our country is lagging behind. We in the civil society organizations have advocated in order to be able to take part in all the processes of public procurement in order to assure this transparency. Because we notice that those legislative reforms dealt away with these private monitoring, and so closing the door in front of the civil society when it comes to monitoring the government's action. But at our end, we didn't stop there. So what we have done is to collaborate with IBP, a gift, and other civil society organizations that monitor other states. And so we continued our advocacy, and at the local level, we worked with some communities who also gave their voice in favor of reintegrating the civil society's watch over the government's processes. And then we organize some cells or some groups, community groups, in order to engage in this discussion with those communities. So with that, we were able to continue to monitor this process of public procurement, and we were able to pinpoint so many irregularities in this system. And we were able to do that because we have this backing from the judicial system, which allows us to also to take a case to the court. And also one point my colleague talked about is access to public information. And at times that was very restricted. But how we like to say it, with a change in context, we need to also change your interventions in order to include public participation. And in that regard, we are working with sectorial ministries. And whenever we face restrictions, we use mechanisms to have the upper hand. And through that, we are able to also keep the government under check and to go ahead. I'm really sorry. I don't mean to cut you short. However, it is really important that we give the opportunity to all the colleagues in the room. This is our last panel discussion, so we really have to democratize our microphone and allow our colleagues to also make their points. So please try not to repeat what has already been said and go straight to the point. Okay, so only in 30 seconds. Now, with regards to restriction on gatherings or manifestations, what we have decided is, instead of engaging on a mass movement, we have decided to create some platforms, community platforms to engage communities. Thank you very much. I'm Estelle. I'm from Benin, and I would like to thank the panelists for their presentations. My question is to Omar from Senegal. I would like to know if he could share with us their actions on how they were able to guarantee this inclusion, women inclusion in their actions, and also to share with us the methodologies and strategies they were able to use to overcome the social barriers that also are undermining democracy in our region. We have noticed that in our activities and in many countries, women's voices are not heard, as well as those of youth. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just wanted to say that the colleague from Benin and Senegal, with regards to what they said, we combine some of their methodologies at the level of Ballet Citoyen. So we have some advocacy or some campaigns to stop those heads of states trying to have a third term. Also, at the level of the universities, we have mobilized the youth to try and sensitize them around citizenship and also political affairs, which allowed some of them during our last elections in 2020 to stand for the legislative elections. And they were able to receive some support, financial support, to stand for those elections. So this is to show that this is also an option that we can consider. When we think that the political system is no more working, we have the potential to change it. And for that, we need to really sensitize the youth. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Quickly, a question and a commentary. I would like to start with Senegal. Yes, passing through the youth is good. It's a laudable initiative, but I would like to know what will you do to make it sustainable? I don't know what are your perspectives. Now, with regards to corruption, I work a lot around corruption, and I would like to delve on a question which doesn't really have to do with the youth per se, but the moral, ethics. We need to, as I said, I'm really involved in this question, and I think that we need to teach people on ethics. And I can share with you the experience of Guinea, where with Professor Alpha Condé, he had recruited 500 youth that he helped in those financial institutions with the belief that those youth were going to do the change. But you can say that the same youth are the ones who are being prosecuted for having embezzled about 35 millions or huge amounts. So that means that we need to really develop the capacities of the youth. We need to have some rules in place. Humbly, I visited Sao Tome, and then we conducted a study on some funds received by the African Development Bank, and those funds were disbursed for a project over 5 years. And we were able to put some strategies to counteract those embezzlements and to sanction in case of embezzlement.
I'm going to take 3 people and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Sweeney from IDEG. So earlier, Madame Omolo mentioned that the youth should be brought on board, maybe through internships or maybe getting them on board. You see, there's one thing I've realized. When there's democratic decline or there's backsliding, it's the youth that are mostly used for anything that is cool, anything. But it looks like when you come to programs like this, I should say I'm the only youth here because I'm less than 29. But you see, we are discussing things that has to do with much of the population. So I think there should be a way sometimes the youth should be brought. When we are sensitized, then we can also sensitize others. I can't be the only one to sensitize everyone. You get it? But if you have others on board, you get to be able to tell others that no, the best way to make things work is not to resort to arms, is to rather say, okay, because if there's arms or you resort to arms and there's violence, it doesn't mean that you are still going to get what you want. It's even still worse. So why don't you rather say, okay, if we think we don't like this, the youth, let's mobilize, let's protest, let's keep our leaders on their toes to do what they're supposed to do. But then if we allow only the older generation, how does the youth even learn? How are you able to learn from the older generation to be able to know what or how to go about things? Thank you.
Thank you. Austin?
Well, I'm also a youth, so that you don't think that... you are less than 29, I'm less than 92. All right, thank you. let me stay with Benin. You know, maybe this will help us as we begin to frame up Wadamos. Each time regime comes to power, all of the agitation we have put in place to create a new regime, we just suddenly relax that an outcome has happened or an output has happened. From a multi-party democracy to an authoritarian regime who won on the ballot of independent candidates. I mean, it's so surprising. So surprising that even the United States of America, an independent cannot win the presidency. Yet, it suddenly just, maybe after a while, the same civil society organization, I don't know, I'm not accusing, they became praise singers. Hallelujah, boys. How can we use this instrumentality that we just launched now to begin to not just immediately after the election, maybe something like we did at CDD, Buhari Mita, articulating all of the promises and the campaign platform and putting it before the public so that there is something to hold these actors, these leaders to account, and then gradually push, I don't want to use the word push, but that's the right word, to keep them on their toe so that when regime changes, we had that problem in 1999. The moment we were able to drive the military, so we said we had democracy. So we went back to sleep. So we are facing a challenge. 2015, we were also there. Something happened. We had, for the first time, a change of party. We thought we had gone there. We are back again. We need Wadamos to create this kind of strategy going beyond ECONEC and other regional body. Thank you very much.
That's great. Any last intervention from that side, or is there one this side? Okay, yes. Last one, please. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Indira Correia Baldé, Guiné-Bissau. Felicito o colega do Senegal.
To really congratulate our colleagues from Senegal for the courage he had to stand for elections. We know that it's nothing easy. We know that the crocodiles in our countries will not allow such things to happen easily. And so I would like to really congratulate him for his courage. Now, with regards to intervention of our colleague from Benin, the shrinking of civic space is still a worry for all of us. All of our countries are facing such situations currently. In our case, I can speak better of the case of my country, Guinea-Bissau. You know, when it comes to media freedom, the situation is worse every day. And in our sub-region, I think there are certain things that happen only in Guinea-Bissau. I think once there was a radio that was attacked. First, it was in the evening, and they vandalized their offices. And the second time, it was like with bullets and in plain day, during the day. And all this because of the program that was being broadcasted on radio. That was a public radio that allowed everyone to take the floor. So gunmen attacked the radio in the morning in broad daylight. Now, after this attack, colleagues were taken to the hospital. However, the union didn't receive the actions requested from the government. And the reaction was that journalists speak too much. That was the government's response. But we know that that's our job. We need to talk about what is going on in our countries. We have to inform the public opinion. So these were the things happening. But currently, our worry, our worries are around those elections, anticipated elections in Guinea-Bissau that are slated for 18th of December of this year. So some of the political parties are trying to open radio stations in order to voice their priorities. And you wonder what will be the role of a journalist in this context, because they will be called to work in those radio stations. The President of the Republic has a radio station working on its favor. The opposition doesn't have a say. There is a unbalanced treaty when it comes to the opposition's actions on the country. So I'm really wondering what kind of rhetoric we'll have for the upcoming elections. If every political party has to create a radio station to speak, are we going to have peaceful elections? So these are the worries I wanted to share with Wademos so that we can really lay a special emphasis on the case of Guinea-Bissau. It's really worrying. Now, those radio stations are untouchable. They can operate with all liberties. And now all the other radios that are not with the political parties are facing all kinds of problems. And now when it comes to elections, I know our fate will be worse. So I think if we are not able to find a solution, we'll have to call on media forum and other CSOs to help Guinea-Bissau. So seriously, work is being undermined. And meanwhile, we use our radio to pass information around all the happenings in the surrounding countries. So we really appreciate your solidarity to help us face the situation in Guinea-Bissau. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Autant de questions pour le Sénégal et le...
So I think we have so many questions for Senegal and Mali. Omar, you have the floor. So I will start with Omar. And I think we'll just respond and then give our closing remarks. With regards to Dieudonné's question, our relationship with the other political parties. You know, peace is our watchword, and our organization is called Peace in the various territories, or Peace in the Land. This is because we know that peace is fundamental for any other gain. We need to forge peace. Now, political parties are worried about power, and they do everything to gain power and to maintain it. So that is why we're trying to really dissociate from the political parties, because we know that some of their practices are not in line with democracy. Another aspect is that political parties showed their weaknesses, and you have some unnatural alliances that are going on. For instance, in Senegal, in the year 2000, we were able to do away with socialism, with Abdou Diouf, and with Abdoulaye Wade and his coalition. He won elections, and the socialism died. Now, in 2012, Macky Sall came to power, created another coalition, which is going to give birth again to social movement that is going to continue in power. Now, in 2024, Abdoulaye Wade is trying to mobilize its forces to come back. And with its alliance, they are going to win the power. So you see, you have some kind of unhealthy alliances that are worrying, and these are some practices that do not really favor democratic rule in our countries. So we have identified those tendencies, and we judge that we cannot associate ourselves with them. But we also have a political rhetoric, and we are trying to give it a force. We are not part of this organization, civil society organizations that back down on its responsibilities. We are we are citizens of the countries, and then we want the voice of the citizens to be heard. So we really need to make our voices heard and to bring our leaders to take into consideration the voice of the citizens. So we are not denying any form of collaboration with other CSOs, but we want to associate with some who align with our ideals and to make the voices of the citizens heard. Some people mentioned that Senegal is a good student when it comes to democratic practices. It's because we are comparing Senegal with other countries. We think that there is more democracy in Senegal. Meanwhile, we shouldn't do such comparison. A country has to compare itself with itself. Democracy is not a competition between a country A and a country B. It is a competition within ourselves. That is a country to work towards its betterment and not in comparison with another country. Now, when it comes to women inclusion, we have given them a place of choice in our activities. And during communal elections, our flag bearer was a woman. And she's the one who is representing CSOs at the municipal level as a municipal advisor. Now, when it comes to women inclusion, we have succeeded in making it a success. Now, with regards to overcoming regional barriers, there are challenges here, but we haven't backed down in front of those challenges. We are leading with them. For instance, the youngest candidate in the municipal elections was part of our organization, and he was aged 27. Now, on the onset of political campaigns, he told us that he couldn't make any campaign because he didn't have the funds to do that. And then we said to him, you have to use your peaceful means to make your campaign. We have motorbikes, so let's use our motorbikes. Let's overcome these means or these weaknesses, or this thought that we need colossal means in order to do political campaigns. We used the means at our disposal to gain, to make our case. So I think to conclude, maybe the person didn't follow my intervention, but I said that the youth have to engage in politics. And we said that civil society members should not back down on their nationality as citizens of the country, and they shouldn't leave their fate in the hands of politicians.
Vraiment, Jami Gori va travailler avec Wademos pour qu'on ait ce
Yes, I think I'm really saying this so that we need to have some kind of manual, including that has tips on democracy. Now, giving you the floor, Mr. Morris. Thank you, Kathleen. I think I'll answer Gideon's question on what we need to do with journalists in Benin in order to enhance their professionalism. I think Jordan's question is not peculiar to Benin. It's a situation we witness in every part of the region. What we need to say is that journalists are aware of their misfortune, of their failures, and what they need to improve. That's why every time we organize dozens of capacity building sessions for the journalists. We have a representative from the Media Foundation doing that work virtually every day. We see groups of organizations, unions of journalists in West African countries. Every day, uh, there are trainings being organized for these people because we know there are new heads, there are new people entering in the sector, and they need to be trained. So journalists are really aware of this. Now, this is not a reason for the authorities that threaten journalists. It's not a reason for authorities to threaten journalists because journalists often raise issues that authorities are not always comfortable with. In 2015, Benin adopted an information code, a law, an act on information. And looking at this act pertaining to information and communication, you can imprison a journalist, but the reality is different today. A few years later on, Benin enacted a new law on the digital aspect, and this has sanctions to punish disinformation. Today, authorities are arresting journalists based on this digital code. So you take, for instance, a journalist making a publication on a website. Since you can imprison this particular journalist based on the information code, you definitely use provisions in the digital code and use this as a basis to imprison the journalists. That's what we are acting against. The situation is not common in only in Benin. It's a situation or a phenomenon that we see in the whole West African region, and it's a reason for the decline in democracy. That's why most of our countries are losing their place in the global ranking in terms of democracy. Our colleague from Guinea-Bissau equally mentioned a very important point, and I already said it. Authorities are not hiding anymore. They fully assume what they say. In Guinea-Bissau, when we say journalists speak too much, what does it mean? So this is a clear will to silence journalists because we know they are actors that fight to promote democracy. In 2018, in Benin, a minister, a very important member of the government, said during a public conference, in order to buttress the increase in internet charges, he said that people are criticizing the government too much. So it means to criticize the government too much, you have to pay. That's why they increase the charges. This is what we are actually fighting for. So when you increase uh, internet charges with the reason that people are criticizing the government too much, this means that you are making life difficult for journalists and bloggers, and they can't really do their work. You are stopping whistleblowers, bloggers, and influencers to conduct effectively their business. So, for the other points that were raised by our colleague Austin, I think we need to continue thinking about them also in Benin. During the first term of President Talon, we implement something we call Talomet, which is a copy of the Buhari Met. So we have initiatives like this, but It's not a one-size-fits approach for a stable democracy. It means every day we need to continue brainstorming on solutions and alternatives in order to enhance and promote democracy. I realize that every day our authorities are also trying to be innovative in order to keep on shrinking the civic space and stop democracy from growing more and more in our countries. I want to end my communication by saying that we've been talking about access to knowledge and capacity building, especially. But we also acknowledge the important role of the youth. These are 2 points we need to always bear in mind. These are lessons that we should take home for all of us, especially members of Wademos, as we try to develop our organizations for the 3 years to come. Thank you, Maurice.
That last month, Waxy organized an intergenerational feminist forum, which speaks to her question about inclusivity, not just for gender parity, but also for generational acknowledgement. So maybe you speak to that and then you close.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I really want to appreciate my two colleagues. These are interesting, bold initiatives that you are pushing forward. And it speaks to the theme that we are discussing in terms of how civil society are pushing back this decline that we are seeing that threatens our democracy. I think three things stood out for me, and this is what I would appreciate if we can take away. Government is indeed scared of these three things. One, civil society. And that is why you see increasingly everywhere you go, government keeps producing counterfeit actors. There are civil society actors who are being on government payrolls in your country, in my country, that are producing alternative people. Again, you see them, instituting their own media agencies. I mean, Nigeria is a clear example. Almost an average politician in a small community has his own radio station, TV stations, where
Everybody is working with a band these days.
Where he, chunks out the information he wants to send out to the public. The third thing I know government is concerned about is technology. And that is to surveil you and myself, to know what you're doing, who you're speaking to, who is giving you resources. And this is to tell you that our role is not unknown or unseen. They know what we are doing and what we can do. And that is why they are paying attention to what you're doing and watching you very closely. So I would like us to part with these five things. If truly we want civil society to continue to exist in West Africa and be this counterweight that we need to government excesses, to threats against the threats to democracy, peace and security in the region, civil society needs to invest in their resilience. Because resilience is going to, we're going to need it. Threats will come and we can't stop the threat. But how do we rebound? How do we respond to this threat? How do we rebuild, after the threat? Like in the case of COVID, how did we respond to that? So investing in our institutional building, investing in our vision, resourcing both human, material, and of course money for you to push forth the mandate which you have created for yourself, it's important. Enhancing your capacity to remain relevant and to be able to respond to the needs of the community that you represent. All of this for me falls under resilience. We need to invest in our resilience building. The second point I want us to take away is collaboration. We cannot succeed except we work together. It is a fact. We have seen, some of our colleagues working in silos, and there's this very popular saying which somebody raised yesterday. If you really want to work fast, you want to do it alone, you want your name to be in all the media house platforms, what you're doing, then you can go ahead and do it alone. But if you want to do it for a very long time, leaving lasting legacy, becoming, a formidable force, you can't do it alone. You have to work with others. And this is where I think WADAMOS has a critical role to play. Working with civil society, and of course, having that collaboration between us. The civil society sector is becoming more and more expanded day in, day out. Civil society organizations working with social movement, because we have different strength. We have different spaces. We use different strategies and tactics. And what a social movement we achieve by, protesting and removing a government like we did in the Gambia, the other organizations, they can't sustain it. Other organizations that have been there for many years who understand, legislative processes and all of that, we continue with that baton. This is why we cannot work in silos. And of course, involving newest actor that I'm seeing now, the democratives. If you see the work they're doing, the kind of art they are chalking out, the kind of poets they are chalking out, the music that are being produced, speaking to democratic backsliding, that we could use. And when we really tap to the power of democratives, this is where we blow off our differences, our religious differences, our ethnic differences, and all of that, because we all connect to it. I think collaboration is another thing that is important and we should go away with. The third one is advocacy. We cannot relent on our advocacy. We dare not, because therein lies our power. They know every government does not like citizens advocating or protesting. It shows that something is going on in your domain. They don't like any disturbances of any kind. And these days that medias are all over, they know they are going to pick it. So not relenting on our advocacy, and enhancing our capacity to advocate, not being placard without knowledge, like Dr. Wale said in Senegal, is key. We need to arm our people with the right data, the right fact. Even though we're civil society, the constituency that we represent must have as much information as we have, so that we don't become the usual suspect. If your director is not there, can the intern say the same thing, that this is what we are fighting for in this organization? If you are not in the community, then can the woman selling granite on the street say, yes, this is the problem we have in this community? Or the knowledge lies with you, and if you are not there, there is no knowledge. So advocacy is important. The fourth one, if we don't address it, is probably going to consume all of us, is civic space. Keeping it open. Without civic space, there is no civil society. You can't operate. If government says there's no movement tomorrow morning, nobody will move in Ghana, because government has the power. I tell people, after God, government is the next most powerful in any country, and it's a fact. So, whatever we are going to do, whatever effort we need to put in place to ensure that the civic space, the space in which we operate, is at least enabled, is free, we need to continue to push that. And this includes the digital space as well, because now we've diversified the ways and manner in which we work. The digital space also needs to be kept open. The final one, which I don't have answer to, would be technology. How do we use tech? How do we tap into the wealth of technology to really push for our democracy to be sustainable? Now, there is this fourth industrial revolution going on, where Africa seems to not, we're not talking about it. We don't even know what is going on there. Like my colleague was speaking earlier in the previous panel, that they say it's intelligence gathering, it's for intelligence folks and all of that. We need to know, what is it? How do we use it to advance our goals? How do we use it to advance social justice and social development? All these things and these are the 5 points I think we can part with. So I really want to thank everyone for inviting WAXI, CDD, for asking us to be part of this great initiative. I was speaking with Kojo earlier in the day or yesterday that I think this is the beginning, and the work ahead, I don't even want to talk about it because it's going to be a very huge one. But together, we can achieve it, and this is the consent of WADAMOS. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Omolara. And with that, a round of applause. There's nothing else to say, trust me. I just want to say thank you to every one of our panelists. Omolara Balogun of WAXI, Oumar Boub of Jami Gori of Senegal, and Maurice Tantan of Afrique in Benin. And I want to thank all of you for participating as well. And we're moving really swiftly to the next item on the agenda here. I will call on Dr. Kojo Asante to come and give us a summary and short-term agenda for WADEMOS and civil society organizations to counter threats to democracy in West Africa. Thank you so very much.
I think we are all very tired. It's been 3 days of hard work, but I'll try to see if we can do this very quickly. Okay, so quickly, I mean, these are just highlights of our, for some of us it's 3 days, some of you it's 2 days. But yesterday, I think we started off quick recognition that in the sub-region as West Africa, we had been at the vanguard of democracy building and consolidation, but we are now facing a retreat. But I think some of our collaborators reminded us that this is just not a West Africa phenomenon. There's other parts of Africa that are experiencing this, and also the world at large. And therefore, the birth of WADEMOS is timely. From our keynote speakers from ECOWAS, they mentioned that there's a new leadership that is eager to deepen the engagement with civil society, and also the agenda of moving ECOWAS from an ECOWAS of the states to ECOWAS of people was going to place citizens at the center of this approach. And they mentioned several initiatives. The resuscitance of the ECOWAS high-level mediators, Council of the Wise, you know, some of the work they were doing around early warning, convening of, looking at the protocols. So these are all initiatives that they thought reflected this new approach. At the AU level, they also talked about their efforts to deepen engagement with think tanks and some of the new processes to strengthen smart policy making. So, for example, just on the 14th, as we were meeting as network partners, the AU Peace and Security Council was having a meeting with Africa CSOs through the AU ECOSOC Council. So our collaborators basically confirmed that this was timely and they wanted to support the platform that we have put forward. I think we have to remember, at least acknowledge, that the interludes we had was the best demonstration of the emphasis on democracies. And just watching those performances, you know, it sort of brought everything together, our conversations and our expressions of it at an emotional level. And it just shows you the power of democracies and how they can add to this agenda that we are trying to pursue. In the panels, setting the scene, I think it was a simple one. We had a balance sheet, increase supply, demand, or stable high demand for democracy and low supply of democracy. And that gap, I think, reflected all the kind of challenges that we were having. And the warning that the longer democracy fails to deliver, democracy itself will remain under attack. So how do we have to bridge that? It's an imperative. If we want to sustain democracy, we need to address that gap between demand and supply. There were some discussions around, I posed the question around how ECOWAS was responding. They said they were using a carrot and stick approach. We asked questions about how they were dealing with shrinking spaces, attacks on human rights defenders. We're giving some ideas about this whistleblower policy they have and the networks that they have set up, which is to protect human rights defenders. And then we discussed various countries who are going through a transition period, issues of insecurity, climate change, inclusion of women, youth, and so on. On the term limits, which is today, I don't have to go over all of that, but very key points. Adopting term limits is an empirical motivation. It's context-specific for us, both on our lived experiences and a strong incentive for accountability. Term limits may remove bad governments, but it's unlikely to address bad governance. ECOWAS decision-making process does not reflect its agenda to move ECOWAS from ECOWAS of states to ECOWAS of people. And I think that was reflective in Ambassador Wakil's almost, acceptance that, the vehicle is not fit for purpose. If we start off, we are going to break down very soon. So we really need to fix that vehicle if we're going to get to that destination. And we had a discussion about the security issues, and we were given all of the various factors: weak economies, unemployment, social exclusion, marginalization, issues around politics, corruption, impunity, state capacity, cyberspace, challenges, proliferation of small arms, geopolitical interests, natural resource misgovernance, weak local government, and then the dynamics around the processes of democracy. And I think it was Fredlina who brought this to light. That all these processes of democracy, there's insecurity around it: protests, speech, elections, gender dynamics, and so on. Issues around the recruitment of young people into terrorism. And then states doing many things, I think from UNOWAS, that some states are trying, but they have limitations in terms of capacity, resources, but also to mention community resilience. And then citizens' response. I think the takeaway for me is that the manual is something we need to look at. There are new ways or new methods of engagement, and very exciting. People are looking at new things, and we need to, also bridge the gap between what older generation experiences are and then what newer generation experiences are. How do you do inclusion? How do you have multiple voices? Because citizens or citizen groups are not homogeneous. We need to look at all of these matters. Now, so if I put all of that, what I am thinking in the short term is really looking at opportunities. And when I look at the regional bodies, the initiatives and some of the things they've talked about for me are real points of entry for some of the things, our strategic priorities. And maybe let me remind everybody our strategic priorities. We are looking at human rights defenders, protecting human rights defenders, addressing shrinking spaces, dealing with insecurity, keeping a focus on countries facing elections, and then also keeping a focus on countries facing transition. So when you take that, some of the initiatives that have been, particularly the fact that we have a new leadership with a new agenda or an old new agenda, that is an entry point, for forging very strong engagement around how ECOWAS, can play its role effectively. How can we work with ECOWAS to ensure that we are protecting our human rights defenders or protecting our shrinking spaces? I think those entry points are very, very, very important. Also, even in securing the state, in the security conversation, It's like, well, these spaces are closed. But if we are going to make any headway, we need to forge closer ties with the state. I think sometimes when the language we use, we, them, the people who manage the state, most of them are probably our friends, our family members, how are we going to have that conversation? Because we cannot continue to just cede that space to a group of people who do not share those values or act differently when they get into that space. So how do we learn to forge a stronger relationship, even in securing the state? But how also do we incentivize the state to act democratically? That's a challenge. Reform of ECOWAS decision-making process, and that came out very clearly in the presidential term limits discussion. It looks like the decision process around consensus building, around even the opacity of the proposals that go to heads of state, that has to be reformed. That's not a short-term process, but it's something that we need to begin to address. Having a campaign on the presidential term limits is clear. I think everybody supports that. There's been already a proposal from our friends in Senegal around their campaign they are doing with democratives, which I think is something that we should look at. Countries facing elections, because election integrity is one of the big triggers around insecurity. We want to make sure that the transitions that are coming in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Nigeria, in Guinea-Bissau, in other places, in Ghana, these transitions go well, because once we are able to overcome that process, then we can talk about governance as well. But to get there, it means that we have to get governance also right. Now, building trust between the state and society, and some of our friends here have given us some very good ideas. And then the simple analogy, which is almost like how do you stop a flood analogy, that you have to stop the water getting into the house. Then you can find a bucket and scoop the water out. There's no way you're going to stop the flooding by just trying to scoop the water out of the house whilst the water is flowing in. This will be a never-ending process. So it's really that if we don't have bad governance, we don't have to worry about disinformation. If the story is good and we're all experiencing it, it doesn't matter how much disinformation is put out there. People will experience the real thing. But if the governance is bad, and you have challenges with economy and all of those things, then it's easier for that story to be manipulated, and then we get all these. So whatever we do, misgovernance and bad governance has to be tackled. Whatever we do, we have to address the economic challenges that our youth face. And then just lastly, a couple of things: engagement with the youth. And everybody has said it, and I take the point. There's a lot of young people here, though. Really, there are some of them are young, right? Maybe they look old, but they are young. and also the fact that there's a lot of organizations that work with young people here. Then studying new approaches to engagement, civil society resilience, and for me, one of the a recurring theme, an intergenerational dialogue. I was in Gambia, and the young people were complaining that, this society, they don't want to do this, and they don't want to do that. And then you see the missed opportunity, that you miss all of the experience and the capacity of, civil society, you say traditional civil society, and you see that, disconnect. And we lose the power that we have as a collective to really fight or address the challenges we have. So I think that intergenerational dialogue, even within civil society, we have to really take it seriously. So that's my summary, and I hope that agenda is even in the short term, it's a tall agenda. But I think around our 5 main strategic priorities, we can really begin to act very strongly as Wademos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kojo. I will call on Mr. Kopep Dabugat to come up and give us the closing remarks for these 3 days of deliberations and the launch. Before that, please continue to use the social media handles. Follow them, actually. Use the hashtags Wademos launch, lancement Wademos, and Solidarité pour tous, Solidarity for all. People will still continue to engage with this post. Wademos will be sharing quotes and short clips and other visuals of the event. So your pictures and all the visuals and captures and some of your words and your interventions will be shared on social media. So please follow Wademos Network and follow the hashtag so that you can catch those interventions and visuals. So you can come up, Mr. Dabugat, and close this very nicely for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Ndongmo, for inviting me. I think all has been said. I don't have much to say. We have, for some of us that were here, that have been here the past 3 days, I think we started with properly what I would call the formalization of relationships within Wademos. We had a meeting with the network members where some of the members formally signed their MOU. So we have a network. Wademos has been formed. And now what remains is the work that we're supposed to do within Wademos. The conference that started after the launch yesterday helped us to highlight some key issues in the background on democratic backsliding in West Africa. One is that threat of democratic backsliding is a very real threat. It is staring us right in the face, and it threatens to take us by storm. What are we going to do about it? Second is, we have also identified that part of the factors within the context of anti-democratic forces in the region are defined by the presence of state level and regional level threats to peace and security that are also very real across the region, which in themselves are having effects on the democratic profile of the region. We have also observed the seeming incapacity of ECOWAS as a regional body to address these challenges alone. Particularly, we've seen the critical example of the issue of tenure elongation and how ECOWAS has neither been here nor there on the issue. We have lastly also identified that the vibrancy in civil society, the potential strength of civil society is one of the key things that can help, to pull us out of this danger of anti-democratic forces across the region. These 4 points have shown that our work as civil society towards advancing democratic values across the region is cut out for us. And I would boldly say here that we are up to the task. If I can reflect back on the last panel, which we had Omolara and Co on the panel. And now we've just listened to Kojo. He has identified the critical areas of focus for WADEMOS. I think for us in the WADEMOS team, that will form our compass of travel in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and in the coming 2-3 years. And on that note, I wish to end my intervention by saying thank you to everyone for making out time to come sit with us and help us to define and fine-tune these agendas. Not just that, but being here to also contribute your ideas, your passion, your expertise, and your commitment, most especially, to this very, very great endeavor. Lastly, I observed something on the panels. Several people have been mentioning, oh, that is why we have WADEMOS. That's why we have WADEMOS. That's why we have WADEMOS. It seems what we want to do is to weaponize WADEMOS. Well, we in the WADEMOS team are up to the task. We can serve as the bullets of that weapon. On that note, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me invite the moderator back to do all the closing honors. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dabugat.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Merci beaucoup. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yes, just some quick